Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down another weather pattern change that'll be coming to the United States by this weekend, and this is going to bring yet again another heat wave to a large chunk of the United States. In addition to this, a large storm will likely be coming to the United States next week, which will bring the return of some severe weather to the northern tier of the United States. And then lastly, we'll be talking about the tropics, as the Atlantic Ocean is very favorable for a big hurricane, but when will we see that next hurricane? In addition to that, we could even see a hurricane go towards Hawaii over in the Pacific Ocean. Let's begin though with what's happening across the United States right now, and overall it is very quiet across the eastern tier of the United States. We don't really even have that much cloud cover across anywhere to the east of the Central Plains right now. It is quite literally unbelievable how quiet it is right now, and it is also pretty nice out there. Many areas dealing with below average temperatures. That is all behind this low pressure system that has now moved up into Canada that was able to usher in some cooler weather to areas in the Midwest and as well as the Ohio Valley, and that'll kind of sit there for the next few days. But we do have a ridge back down in Texas that is going to start to bring warmer air to areas like the Midwest and the Ohio Valley as we go into the weekend and as well as into early next week, and we'll talk more about that here in just a second. Also, we do have a stationary frontal boundary back over in Florida. This will keep areas in Florida very active for the next few days, with plenty of showers and thunderstorms in the forecast there as we go into the weekend and as well as maybe even into early next week. Now let's talk more about the weather pattern that'll be impacting the United States over the next 10 days, and we're going to begin with the jet stream. This gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States, and right now we have a high pressure system that's back down in the southern plains. Here is your jet stream, which right now is still meridional. That is actually allowing for that cooler weather to continue across areas like the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, with this trough that's been digging back over in the Northeast United States. Now that particular trough is not really bringing any rain, but it is bringing cooler weather. But as we go later into this week, we are going to start to see a pretty drastic change, especially for the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, because watch this ridge really begin to move and build across the Midwest and as well as the Ohio Valley. This is going to end up bringing warmer weather to those areas. We are going to see high temperatures return to the 90s as we go into the weekend for much of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. But another big story is going to be this large and really, impressive trough back over in the Pacific Northwest by Saturday. This is actually going to have some pretty good, strong jet stream winds, and this could allow for some severe weather as we go into Saturday and Sunday in the northern plains, and then perhaps even into the Midwest on Monday. But a lot of those details remain uncertain. With how strong this ridge is going to be, it might actually allow for enough capping to basically allow for not really much of any severe weather in many areas like the Midwest. So we're going to have to watch that trend closely. But since this trough is likely going to be negatively tilted, that does increase the potential for severe weather, as we are going to see a lot more moisture surging to the north, especially back up in the northern plains and as well as Canada. So this could actually be a severe weather maker to some extent. The exact details though do still remain relatively uncertain. And then by the middle and end of next week, things do become even more uncertain, but we are likely going to see a second storm behind that one. And the second storm, I think, will have a better shot at producing some level of severe weather, perhaps to the Midwest, maybe even the Ohio Valley, and then eventually that could impact the Northeast. But either way you split it, we are going to get a cold front behind both of these low pressure systems, and that should bring some cooler weather to areas like the northern plains and the Midwest by next week. Here's what the dew points look like across the United States today and tomorrow. Just look at all that moisture anywhere from Texas all the way back through the northern plains, and all this moisture is really just going to kind of sit here for the next several days, which is another reason why as we go into the weekend and early next week, we could get some severe storms back over in the northern plains that could end up bringing some hail, wind, and maybe even an isolated tornado or two. So something to watch for both Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And then if we do get a second storm, there will not be nearly as much moisture content with the second trough, but it should be enough still for some level of severe weather. Whether we are talking about just some isolated severe storms or a full-blown outbreak, again, just remains very uncertain. But typically in the end of August and even into September, we don't usually get that many severe weather outbreaks. They are much more rare this time of the year across much of the lower 48. Here's what the future radar looks like for the next few days, beginning with tomorrow. High pressure will continue to dominate at the surface level across the entire East Coast. The only exception is Florida, where we do have a stationary frontal boundary that will continue to penetrate showers and thunderstorms there all the way probably into early next week. Some isolated storms possible in the northern plains. The West Coast will be pretty spotty for the most part. We'll continue to see showers and storms in Arizona and really the Four Corner states throughout the weekend. again, pretty typical for this time of the year. By next week, things are going to start to really kind of just gradually increase in terms of activity. We'll start to see some isolated severe storms Sunday and Monday back over in the northern plains and perhaps the upper Midwest. Very typical for this time of the year. No surprise here. Might see some sort of severe weather maybe in Illinois as we go into like late Monday into Tuesday, perhaps like a line of thunderstorms, but again, not really any certainty with that right now. And then by the time we go into the middle and end of next week, there's a better chance that we'll start to see a more organized threat for severe weather materialize in the Midwest. But again, we are still about 7 days out, so a lot of this does change typically when we are 7 days out. And then by Thursday into Friday, things do become a bit more uncertain. But as long as we do get this low pressure system, I do think we're going to start to see some more severe weather by the very tail end of this month across the Ohio Valley, Midwest, and as well as maybe even the Northeast United States. So rainfall accumulation over the next 5 days is not going to be very impressive if you're anywhere in the southern plains, the Ohio Valley, or really anywhere along the East Coast unless you're in Florida. It's going to be very dry. On the flip side of things, there will be plenty of rain down in Florida and even back over in the northern plains. Once we go into next week, we are going to start to see that rainfall start to become a bit more in terms of coverage, increase a little bit, especially in the Ohio Valley and Midwest. But again, not really much, especially if you're back down in the southern plains of the Dixie Alley, which again is not very untypical for this time of the year. It's just one of those things where we need some rain, and a lot of those areas are just not going to see any over the next week or so. The temperatures for the next several days, well, overall, colder weather will continue across the entire eastern tier of the United States, with below average temperatures continuing to focus in those areas. Warmer than average weather will continue across the entire Great Plains and a little bit cooler on the West Coast. Once we get closer to the weekend, that cold air will build across the western tier of the country. The colder weather will start to go away over in the Midwest and the East Coast as that warmer air starts to build with a stronger southerly wind across much of the Great Plains and the Midwest. By next week, that warmer air is just going to continue to siphon across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, so we aren't really going to see any more relief until probably very late next week. And if we do see relief, it would come behind that secondary trough, not really the first one, and that would bring some colder weather to areas like the Midwest. Now, what does this mean for the actual temperatures? Well, for today, notice high temperatures in the 100s in Texas, 80s and even 70s across the Central Plains, and the Midwest really only in the 60s and even a few 70s. It's actually pretty cold up there for this time of the year. But watch this as we go into Sunday afternoon. Temperatures are going to soar across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and even the Central Plains, with many areas returning back to typical summer heat, with many areas in the 80s in the Midwest. We got 90s in Iowa and even 100s back over in Kansas. And Monday and Tuesday don't look much better. They're going to continue to stay pretty warm in those areas for both Monday and Tuesday. That first trough might bring some slightly cooler weather to the Midwest, but the bigger cool down would come out of that second trough. This would be Friday afternoon if we do get that cold front next Friday, and that would bring temperatures back into the 60s and even maybe some 50s back over in the northern plains on Friday, which is something you don't see very often in August. Now, this might shock you, but we are near the end of August and we have absolutely no tropical cyclone activity that's expected in the next 7 days across the entire Atlantic basin. This is something you do not see very often, but I do have to say, I do think we are going to start to see at least one or two hurricanes really start to build up as we go at least into the end of the month, if not into early September, as there are going to be some tropical waves coming off of Africa that are going to be pretty favorable. We're in a very favorable time of the year, and it's also a very favorable environment in general across the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to kind of show you in a second what I'm talking about in the Atlantic Ocean. Let's go to the Pacific Ocean, though, real quick for Hawaii, which is not something we ever talk about in videos, but we actually have an area of development just east of Hawaii, which has a high chance of developing. We also have Hurricane Gilma right behind it, and one of these two, if not both of them, will actually be going in the direction of Hawaii, and that will be something to watch for as we go into next week. So beginning with the Atlantic Ocean, this is a combination of a bunch of computer models all into one. Reason why I'm showing you this is as we go into next week, we are going to have a tropical wave moving across the central Atlantic Ocean, and overall, a lot of the ensemble members are showing this as just a typical tropical wave, nothing really organized. But as we get closer to next weekend and eventually into the following week, so early September, there's a lot of signals that we are going to have some sort of tropical system develop across either the Caribbean Sea, the Western Atlantic Ocean, or even in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, notice the spread. There are a lot of ensemble members that have this system in a lot of different areas. All these ensembles showing a different location with this tropical wave, but the general gist is that we are likely to see our next tropical storm or hurricane as we go into the very first week of September, somewhere here in the Atlantic Basin. Now, if something develops, it is a very favorable Atlantic Ocean environment where any tropical system that develops could go crazy and become a major hurricane. I'm not even even joking when I say that. Like, if something goes into the Gulf, it's probably going to go crazy, bearing any major, environmental parameter like shear or something like that, hindering tropical development. Either way, it is an extremely unfavorable environment across the entire Atlantic Ocean, but especially in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea, that have been pretty much untapped this entire year, aside from Hurricane Beryl, which was back 2 months ago. It's been a while since Beryl even happened, so just keep that in mind. Here's what we're looking at in Hawaii, the same sort of gist with the ensemble members showing a tropical system moving towards Hawaii as we go towards this weekend. Right now, it's not expected to become anything significant there in Hawaii, probably just a tropical storm. And then as we go into late next week, we're going to have a lot of potential, at least, for there being another tropical system near Hawaii. This would be the remnants of Gilma, most likely still a tropical storm. A couple of ensembles still have this as a hurricane, but it's pretty unlikely we're going to see a hurricane in Hawaii. But it's definitely going to be something to watch for. We could actually have a double shot here when it comes to tropical systems in Hawaii, which is not something you see either very often, even during this time of the year. So something to watch for if you're in that part of the country. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.